Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by CFFC featherweight champion Jose Perez. Jose, how are we doing today?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Great. A lot better now that I'm talking to you, man. Been watching you for a bit. So, you just hit your 2-year anniversary of your fight with Paul Capaldo, and I mean that fight was ridiculous, man. Everyone knows how good that fight was. It was a fight of the year kind of thing for CFFC, and you were all bloodied up at the end. I just wanted to ask, looking back on that fight, what do you think about that matchup and just what went down?
Oh, I think that it turned into exactly what everyone knew it was going to be. Capaldo was one of like the best guys that they had over there. Um, I think, I don't think, I know for a fact that obviously everyone involved assumed that that was going to go his way, and he had the contract with Dana White's Contender Series, and not to boast, but yeah, obviously now we know I'm dangerous. But at that time, it was kind of like this guy, as in talking about myself, like I could have been an issue.
Yeah.
And credit to Capaldo, and I said that to Arias, who's the matchmaker for CFFC, like going in that, like honestly, I'm surprised that he took it because he's he's good, he's well known out there. They could have definitely just set him up against a can, and he would have sold a shit ton of tickets.
Yeah.
Things would have went his way. He would have got another highlight reel knockout, but instead he took the fight, and that he had to know that there was some level of risk. And I mean, win, lose, or draw, we both won from that fight. And I think that even though it didn't go his way, we both have benefited from that. That there's just so much notoriety that's happened from that fight.
Well, I definitely agree, and I know Paul does too, because I actually had the chance to talk to him about your fight back when I met him at CFFC, one of the events, and he had nothing but good things to say about you, the fight in general, and he felt like it really did improve him as a fighter and really helped out his career. So I'm glad that I'm glad that both of you were able to accept such a tough matchup and then get something out of it. You know what I mean? Usually some guys feel bad about losses and stuff, but they're really learning experiences, and that's a fight that you can really learn a lot from, both of you.
Yeah, I think that I was in a situation where I needed some like clout,
Hmm.
and he had it already, so he didn't need to take the fight. He could
Yeah.
have just like, what do they call it, living off of your hype,
Yeah.
and he could just lived off his hype and fought, like I said, a tomato can, and it would have went his way like a
Mhm.
lot easier. But I mean, dude's a dog, and like we said when I made the post for the 2-year anniversary,
Mhm.
he commented, he was like, "Good times," and
Yeah.
I was like, "Great fighters need great fighters, man," and that's a fact. That's true.
It's very much a fact because I mean it just proves the level that both of you guys are on, and that fight, like I heard John Morgan say it, but that fight could have been on the Contender Series. Like, you guys are both high level enough that that fight very well could have been for a spot in the UFC at that time. So you had that cut on your eye in that fight that was like, I mean, the amount of blood that came out was absurd. It was genuinely just absurd. And now look at you now. You have another little mark on your eye here. Just tell me about that cut on your eye. I wanted to ask, did you think it was very close to being like the fight being stopped, and what are your thoughts on that cut?
Well, I mean, in the moment, nobody knows. Like
Hmm.
sometimes when I'm cornering guys and like maybe their opponent has a little cut, I'll like, oh, he's bleeding real bad, because when you're in the moment, you just see blood. You have no clue if like it's just a paper cut, a little nick, or if like your fucking head's gonna fall off right now. You have no clue what it's like in the moment. Um, and before that, I had had one fight in my third pro, or one cut in my third pro fight,
Okay.
and that one I thought was horrible, but then when I got back in the locker room, it was like really small, not a big
Okay.
deal. So I think in that one, I was like, it's probably not that bad. It's probably not that bad. But then at some point, either later in the second round or in the early in the third round, I had taken him down, and I'm looking at the mat, and of course the mat's white, so it like emphasizes how much blood there
Yeah.
is. And I'm watching it just pour out, and I'm starting to realize like, oh shit, this is a really bad cut, and it was getting in my eye and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and it just seemed like he could kind of land at will anything on that side. And so I mean, I knew it was a problem, but I
Mhm.
was just so far into the fight that I was just kind of zoned in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy that you were able to still go out there and pick up the win after getting cut so badly. I mean, you performed very well even after being cut, and it was just kind of crazy because usually you'll see guys succumb to something like that, and you just went out there, and it's almost like it activated something in you, like, oh, now I need to really go ahead and go get this win. So that was just really cool. That was a really cool moment, I thought. So you've been doing jujitsu since a very young age. It was actually your introduction to martial arts, but I wanted to ask, what made you start doing MMA in general, and what was the transition like?
Well, I started jujitsu when I was 9, and that was just because um, my dad and his older brothers, he's got a bunch of brothers, are all competitive with each other. And once you reach a certain age, you can't really be athletically competitive with each other anymore. So I think that we were just an extent, they were using us as an extension of themselves and having like all the like me and my cousins trying to kick each other's asses, to see whose son was tougher. And then when they moved on to the next thing in the next phase, then they were doing football and shit like that. And I tried the football and just, I fell in love with what I was doing. And then as far as the transition, when I first started, it was like 2004, and there was jujitsu tournaments, but there was no money to be made in jujitsu. So my coach was Miguel Torres, and he's a black belt under Carlson Gracie Jr., but at the time he was a purple belt under Carlson Gracie Sr., who,
Okay.
if you don't know, actually today is 18 years of his death. It's the 18th anniversary of his death, I should
Wow.
say.
Okay.
So kind of coincidental, but really big legend as far as jujitsu goes, and he was really big into like top pressure and the aspect of like the application of jujitsu into like actually fighting. And Miguel had always told me that like there was never an if and or but about it. Just as soon as I got in, I was learning jujitsu, but there was never a doubt that I was like learning jujitsu to apply it to MMA. That the goal was always to be an MMA fighter. That's just
Gotcha.
what I loved. So there was never guessing. There wasn't really much of a transition period. Like I say, that there's sport jujitsu, these guys that um really good at off their back, really good submissions, but um getting the top position isn't like priority. For me, I'm going to obviously off my back, I've gotten some submissions and stuff like that, but my goal is always to use my jujitsu, even off my back, to try to get to a position where I can land strikes and try to finish the fight. So I don't think it was very much of like a very hard transition for me to go from jujitsu to MMA, because like I said, in the back of my head, that was always what was going to happen. So I just
Gotcha.
think my jujitsu is tailor made for it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I know a bit about the Gracies because I'm a white belt under Hollis Gracie. So I actually,
Yeah, but
I
These guys at Carlson's literally believe that Carlson Gracie's jiu-jitsu is something separate, even separate from Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Like when I talk to them, they say it was judo, Japanese jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then Carlson Gracie jiu-jitsu is a thing of its own.
that's really cool
Um,
actually.
at least I'm sure everyone thinks that what they do is special, but I can tell there's a definitive difference in what I do as a grappler and what a lot of guys do. And I just think that in MMA, I'm going to be jujitsu's rebuttal to wrestling, and I can't wait to show that like on a really big platform, go against the best sambo guys, the best wrestlers, and they all in the UFC. And when I get there, you guys will see a big difference in what I do. I'm not just trying to catch guys, I'm trying to smash guys, smother guys, destroy guys.
Yeah, it's like a modern jiu-jitsu in a sense where you can kind of just use it to get to better positions and then implement more martial arts while in the process. I love the thought process. I really do.
Yeah, really the opposite of modern jujitsu. Modern
Well,
jujitsu is
yeah,
kind of
fair.
turning into its own sport. This
Yeah.
is actually pretty old school, and that's why I
Okay.
tell people like old school jujitsu.
Okay. So you like you just talked about, you trained under Miguel Torres, who's a legend in his own right. I just wanted to ask what his impact on your career was and how much you were able to learn from him.
Oh, I started with Miguel forever. That's the wrestling and things like that. I've kind of come into my own, like, and the wrestling has complemented my jujitsu. But as far as just like my philosophy on fighting and stuff like that, that's all from Miguel. Because like when I was growing up, I'm from like Harvey, which is like a
Mhm.
shitty, like I'm from a shitty trailer park in Harvey, and he's from like a place called East Chicago, which is
Mhm.
not Chicago, it's East Chicago, Indiana.
Okay.
Chicago and is like right next to the water, and then right across the border of Indiana, which is like spitting distance. So he's in Indiana, but it's an extension of Chicago, basically. So he's
Okay.
from a shitty neighborhood out there. But yeah, I been growing up doing jujitsu with Miguel. That was always the like plan to do MMA. Fucking when my mom died when I was in eighth grade, I actually got adopted by Miguel and lived with Miguel for like the rest of high school. And I just, that's always been the goal. So, I mean, I don't train with him anymore, but I always try to pay homage to where I got this stuff from. And he impacted me huge, like huge.
That's really cool, man. One, rest easy to your mother, but two, I mean, that's really cool. I had no clue that you were like living with Miguel and that he actually adopted you and everything. That's amazing. I mean, it must have been really special, honestly, because like it showed that your relationship extended a lot farther than fighting. You know what I mean? He really had like major impacts on you.
Oh, 100%.
Hmm.
We butted heads because of it.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't the greatest idea, but the intentions were good and
Hmm.
everything, was positive on that end. So, I mean, it's huge. And yeah, it just showed that he also believed in me. Like that was the like that jujitsu was the first thing, and fighting as a whole was like the first thing that I ever did that made my parents proud. That was the first thing I ever did that like made people impressed by me. And I think that as a kid I just took that and ran. And I'm still trying to impress people with fighting. It's just this is what I love to do.
It's funny that you say that because that's kind of how I feel about like myself doing MMA media. It's the first time I felt that people are really like proud of what I'm doing and like really support me and are really like want to see me do better and everything. So I definitely understand where you're getting from with that. MMA is it's an avenue, man. It's awesome. So
Boys are really simple.
yeah.
We'll literally damn near jump through any hoop and walk through fire just for a pat on the back. And it
Hmm.
sounds dumb, but it's
It's
really
really true.
honest, and it's almost all boys.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's some girls out there too, but I know for a fact that just as a little boy, you'll do anything for a pat on the back.
I completely agree. So now you train at Gilbert Grappling, and you've been there for quite a bit, and you have teammates there, Beau Samaniego, rest in peace, Isaac Watkins, Henny Man. Just tell me a little bit about Gilbert Grappling and their impacts on you and how it's been training with those guys for the past couple of years now.
Yeah, I think that Gilbert Grappling kind of scratches an itch that goes like that I had even before. It just they have a similar thought process to me that I had even before.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm from kind of a shitty trailer park neighborhood, and
Hmm.
my mom is she would just bust her ass for us. And I just remember like my mom always wearing shitty clothes to make sure that we had like nice stuff,
Yeah.
but that's I always say like everybody in the neighborhood was broke, so it was like not that big of a deal. Like no one was like walking around like in the nicest clothes. Everybody kind of was getting the hand-me-downs from their big brother.
Okay.
And I just think that that taught me that like you don't need a lot to do a lot. You can do a lot with very little, and that is really what Gilbert Grappling is. If you looked, it's kind of rough. We're literally located right off the expressway,
Oh.
next to a junkyard. Like it's a rough little like spot, and the mats
Okay.
are not the like. There's little holes in the mat,
Hmm.
and I don't know. Just everybody kind of has the same idea that we don't need like fancy gyms. A lot of these guys they go seeking like UFC fighters or guys that are like hyped up, you know what I'm saying? And
Yes,
and they think
definitely.
that somehow like that they'll take enough Instagram pictures with someone that's famous that somehow that'll rub off on them, and it won't, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So we always say we're beating like $1 million corners. Like I'm cornering Beau
Yeah.
saying profanities to his opponent, and his coach is Aljamain Sterling, who at the time was the
Yep.
bantamweight champion of the world. We're coaching against like some of the best guys, some of the very best guys, and with like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
these guys all have like access to the highest level of training.
Yeah.
Like they're from beautiful gyms, Mecca gyms. They all train with each other.
Hmm.
There's UFC fighters left and right,
Oh yeah.
and we don't have any. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So, um, kind of like when we came into CFFC, they weren't expecting much, you know what I'm saying? And we showed them that they should, and I came in first, put my foot in the door and opened up the door for the rest of us.
Hmm.
And honestly, I think that Beau's next in line for the title if I could just hurry up and get the call and get out of his way.
Yeah.
And when I do get the call, I think it's gonna be the same thing, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? They're not gonna know what to expect because if you're coming into the UFC and you're brushing shoulders with Eddie Alvarez and all these like big name, Sean Brady, you're brushing shoulders with all these UFC fighters. They kind of expect a lot from you, and as far as us, they don't expect anything. They don't know what to expect. So I plan to go into the UFC and do the same thing I did with CFFC, man. Put my foot in the door, shine as bright as I can, and just you know bring my boys in through the back door.
Yeah, definitely. I was at that fight when you were screaming obscenities at Damian Nelson when Beau was fighting him. I was there and I heard you cursing and I thought it was
I can't
hilarious.
fight for him, but And I always explain it. I apologize. I'm not a bad guy. I apologize to him at the end, like, hey, it's just gamesmanship. If I can like, if I can say something from the corner that'll
Mhm.
impact his opponent or like maybe get in his head even slightly, then I will say whatever the fuck it takes.
Yeah, you'll take that advantage if you can, most definitely. I wanted to ask about more about your relationship with Beau a little bit because I know you guys are very close, and like you said, you kind of like are waiting to get out of his way and everything. But I know you guys have been working together for years, and this has been a thing that's a long time coming, basically. So I just wanted you to elaborate more on just your relationship
Yeah.
with Beau.
Well, the first time I seen Bo, I should say, me and my girl were sitting on the couch and we were just going through like YouTube videos of like, it was a company called United Combat League that's no longer around that
Okay.
I was fighting for as an amateur, and he was fighting there too. And he was just so arrogant to me. And I was like, fuck that guy. I'll whoop his ass. Like I hated him. And then ended up going to G2 one day, running into Bo, and a little standoffish, but not too much. And then we started kind of training together, and they seemed like that I was the real deal, at least as far as jujitsu is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we always talk about this in joke, and Dan was like, "You see that guy?" Talking about me, like, "You see that guy? That guy needs to be your best friend. We're the same size, same weight. It's just a match made in heaven as far
That's
as that
awesome.
goes." Um, and and I always say it's like I created my own protagonist. Like the one who's most likely to beat me would be Bo because he understands everything I'm doing, and he we train together so much that he's naturally getting good at the things that I'm bad at. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So if I have a hole, he's gonna try to make himself better
Mm-hmm.
and try to take advantage of that gap in my game.
Yeah.
And so like if I'm bad at defending arm bars, Bo is naturally going to gravitate towards arm bars because we just spar together so
Yes.
much. So by him getting better at arm bars on the offensive side, I'm getting better at them on the defensive side. And that's just one like small example to isolate something. But it could be like he tries to flood my range and tries to not let me use my jab. So now I have to be able to fight in a phone booth,
Yeah.
which guys with my length don't normally do. But because I'm training with him so much, he's getting better at taking advantage of my flaws, and I'm getting better at like getting rid of those flaws. And I think that goes both ways. And it's just iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, most definitely. You guys have clearly helped each other out a lot throughout this journey of both your careers, and I think it's really cool that it didn't start out friendly, but then it was like you guys need to be friends because of just the level you're on and where you could go with being
Yeah.
friends. So I really
Now that
I
we've
really
been
like that.
training together and kind of talk enough, we realize that like we probably didn't like each other because we always say it, we're the same guy. We're the same guy. We like think about things and look at things, and our perspective on life and fighting is
Hmm.
like so in line and parallel. It's crazy.
Okay. So you had the viral call out of the matchmakers, and after your last fight you beat up Chris Vassell and then you called out the matchmakers. I just wanted to ask if that was a planned thing or was that just an in the moment, like it's my shot, like I want it now.
Um, well, I won't say that I like took notes or anything. I knew how I was feeling leading up to that, and I
Hmm.
knew that it just seemed like Capaldo got the shot at Contender Series, and they thought he was going to kick my ass and ride off into the sunset, and that didn't happen. So I assumed that when I beat him, that maybe I would get the shot, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then when I re-signed a contract with Cage Fury, I almost did it with like the thought in the back of my mind that I'm like, all right, I'm going to go win the title, and like that'll be that. I won't have to fight on the regional scene again. And I was surprised that I did, and it just kept. I'm like, man, what's the delay? What's the delay? Because I'm purposely fighting undefeated guys. Like, so I'm at an odd number of fights. So it's just about half of my fights against undefeated opponents. And
Okay.
nobody does that.
No.
Nobody does that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can say it now, but I accepted that fight with Hyder Emil because his opponent fell out from visa issues. And I was like thrilled at the fact that that would be my 10th professional fight, 5 against undefeated opponents. And it just kind of goes to show like what I'm doing. Everybody says that they're looking for the toughest tasks, but are they fucking really? Are they fucking really?
Most of
Like
the
I
time,
am
no.
actually doing the things that other guys are saying they're doing. And I just assume that not only am I doing that, I'm fighting them where it's most difficult. So it's not the easiest task. I'm taking risks right and left. And then when I'm taking a risk, I'm taking the riskiest path through that risk. And it's just I assumed that that would show, like, give context, like, all right, this guy's the fucking real deal, and maybe kind of shorten that path to the UFC, and it just hasn't worked out that way. I just feel like I've seen the past 2 years fighters get on the contender series that I know for a fact I could beat. And that was another reason Hyder Emil would have been a cool fight, is just because I know that, like, I already had a plan. I'm like, I'm going to fucking beat this guy and kind of talk some more shit. Like, you guys picked him over me, bro. So, long story to kind of explain where my head was at. But
Mhm.
yeah, I knew I was upset with the matchmakers, and
Okay.
I just believed that matchmakers were like picking through with a fine tooth comb and like really finding like the highest level of talent, not just the highest level of hype, but it does seem that hype is a huge factor. I just think that I was really surprised and kind of like hurt by the fact that this is more of a business than it is a sport. I know
Mhm.
everybody needs to get paid, so I understand the thought process behind it. But I don't know. I guess I just thought that the very best fighters go to the UFC, regardless of how many followers they have on Instagram, regardless of how many UFC fighters are standing next to them in pictures on Instagram. I had a different idea. So that was me just speaking from the heart, and maybe I dropped a couple more F bombs than I would have liked, but I said what I felt, and
Mhm.
I stand by it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would have to 100% agree with your sentiment that you've fought better guys, beaten better guys, and are better than some of the guys that are getting opportunities in the UFC. Some guys that are on the contender series, some guys that get signed outright. You're right. You are better, and you do deserve that shot. And I think it's very soon to come. Obviously, like you just said, you were offered the fight against Hyder and Mill. I'm guessing that obviously didn't go through because
Yeah,
you're talking about it now.
I'm
Like
still talking to you.
exactly, but so I don't really want to follow up too much because I don't know how much you can say, but I'm assuming that that fight fell through, but at least you got an offer.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome, awesome. That's really good to hear. At least that you're being contacted by them because it
yeah,
shows.
we're tangoing with some things. There's like some things in the works, some
Hmm.
possibilities. Um, but really, it's that's kind of why my strength of schedule hasn't been so hot lately. I know for a fact, like I don't need to prove anything to myself, and I
Hmm.
don't really feel like I should have to prove anything to anybody else at this point. That I belong in a premier organization,
Yeah,
and why would I bother, doing it for, you know, regional level pay when I could be doing it for the pay I deserve.
yeah.
I know that I'm one of the best fighters in the world. I'm just ready to find out if I am the best fighter in the world.
I love that mentality. So your first loss was to DeAndre Anderson. You got knocked out in the first round. It was definitely a tough loss, but you said it might have been exactly what you needed in the moment to make you better. I wanted to ask what that loss taught you and how it did end up making you better in your opinion.
Oh, it just gave me a realistic perspective. We're in fistfights. We're in fights.
Hmm.
If you've seen like my behavior and my demeanor in the cage for all of the fights before that and that one in itself, I was very arrogant outside of the cage in who I fought and who I accepted and the time frame in which I did it.
Okay.
But I just don't think that I was as aggressive as I needed to be. I don't think that I like had full belief in myself, and I think that that loss kind of took some weight off my shoulders, and I it put me in a situation where these guys weren't my expectations weren't as high. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? They didn't expect as much from me, so it gave me a chip on my shoulder, and now that's kind of what's developed this like crazy ass fucking demeanor that you've been seeing in the cage like time and time again. Where I don't know, like I just uh, I'm piss and vinegar, man. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't anything physical. Obviously, it was an 11-second fight. To be honest, I always tell everybody like the only fight I lost, like I fucking wasn't there for it.
Mhm.
Like I wasn't there for that fight. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean like to make an excuse like I wasn't mentally there and
Mhm.
that's why I lost. Like no, dude knocked me out in 11 seconds.
Yeah.
I didn't fucking fight, man. I
No,
didn't fight.
seriously though.
Um, but no, it just kind of it gave me a real sense of the gravity of the situation of what I'm getting myself into. It let me know that 4 ounce gloves are they hit a lot harder than I thought they did. You know what I'm saying? Um, So now I go out there and I understand that. Now I can
Okay.
kind of play the game a little bit and be a little bit more intelligent in my decisions.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And you can see obviously the improvements you have had, even though, there was a very short time frame in between that fight and then the rest of your fights after it. I mean,
2 months.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and then you just kept going with that pace of just fighting consistently, which is what I wanted to ask you about next, actually. You started your career with 7 fights in 16 months, and then you've only had 2 fights since February of 2022. I wanted to ask, what was the reason you were so active to start your career, and what was the reason that you dropped off in the activity there?
Yeah. Well, the high pace in the beginning
Hmm.
was I wasn't gonna fight. There's a 3 year gap between my last amateur fight and my first professional fight,
Hmm.
and that was because I had 2 daughters
Yep.
and I needed to try to like get a house and kind of get things situated for them. And once that happened, I got the blessing from my girl to like yeah, you know what, fuck it, let's keep going because I was just a bitter guy on the couch, talking about what I could have done. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to really find out for myself and prove it to everyone else that, I am as good as I say I am. I really have been doing this my whole life, and I am prepared for these things. I am prepared for these opportunities. I'm prepared for these fights. Um, but again, going back, so I ended up quitting the job I had and going with something that was a little bit more friendly to my fighting schedule, but it doesn't pay as much. So
Okay.
I needed to get to the point to where the MMA career was fruitful, and I needed to get there as fast as possible. So that was why my pedal was on the floor. You know what I'm saying? I was rattling them off, just trying to get the numbers. I was rattling off fights back to back to get the numbers.
Okay.
I was trying to put on crazy fights to so that I could impress the
Hmm.
matchmakers, and I was trying to go against undefeated fighters so I could impress the matchmakers and just
Hmm.
try to get to the UFC as quick as possible.
Yeah.
I don't do this with any expectation of being rich, but uh, if I could make $60,000 from doing uh, whatever day job, like a normal 9 to 5, or I can make $60,000 from doing something that I genuinely enjoy. This is a no brainer.
Yep.
Why would I go be a cog in a machine where, like anything else I do, I'm replaceable?
Yep.
If I'm like in a factory, they could fire me, put someone else in there, and it's won't miss a beat. It's like I never left. But fighting, whether for better or for worse, whether you say I'm good, great, or horrible, I fight in a way that no one else can mimic. You know what I'm saying? There's not another me.
Yeah.
There's no one else. So that was the point of the really crazy pace. And I kind of already covered why I slowed down, and that's just because we're we're fighting and we see where we're at. Because instead of continuing to rattle off, taking damage, because I'm not putting on boring fights and I'm not avoiding situations. I'm not in the game of self preservation. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm actually trying to go out there and scrap. Like these guys are trying to win on points. These guys are trying to compete. I'm going out there and trying to fuck dudes up, and it's a big difference. You know what I'm saying? It just means that I'm taking damage, and if I could take that damage on a premier platform for the pay that I know I deserve, then I have no problem with it. But if I don't have to do it for less money, then I'd rather not.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, Jose, that's all I got for you today, man. I really appreciate talking to you. It was very I looked forward to
I've
this a
told you
lot.
I talk my ass off, man.
Hey, I will never complain about it, man. I will never complain. I love this conversation, and please talk your ass off to me in the future. So, seriously though, I really appreciate it, Jose. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Let me get some fight news or something
Mhm.
going, and then we could try to talk again, and I'll have
Definitely.
something more to talk about.
Awesome. That'd be great.